machen.
In Germany, a battle for the future is underway. Where ordinary people are going to extraordinary lengths
I'm fighting for something that's very, very serious for me.
to save the planet from climate change.
Wir sind von der letzten Generation, die Klimakatastrophe noch aufhalten kann.
Using what's known as direct action protesting.
It's really a matter of life and death right now.
But what happens when one man's climate crusader becomes another's climate extremist?
Dann sind das schwerste Straftaten, die man auch genauso benennen muss. Aber es gibt unterschiedliche Formen des Terrorismus.
Kopf kaputt. Die wollen die Welt retten mit was? If they find me, if they track me down, they will kill me.
"2023 was the world's hottest year on record. The effects of climate change are already observable. The UN's climate change body, the IPCC, says human activities have warmed Earth's climate by more than 1 degree Celsius since the late 19th century. It's having a significant economic impact on everything from agriculture and energy to insurance and infrastructure. And as temperatures rise, so too does desperation. But this we already know. It's all over the news every single day. And skeptics remain.
Climate catastrophist clown Greta Thunberg still behaving like a spoilt little brat. Calm down, love.
As many people look the other way, not wanting to face the facts, others are ready to fight.
I'm 42 years old and I have spent the last year in full-time for climate activism, but actually my normal job would be in IT. Someone approached me who I trusted and said, you should really go to this presentation about the climate crisis. That was for me the magical moment.
From there, Christian's convictions have only intensified.
I'm willing to go to jail. It means I'm fighting for something that's very, very serious for me.
Ablauf, denke ich mal, wird so geblieben sein.
Genau. Du musst ein bisschen gucken, was so die Situation ist, dass es nicht zu brenzlig ist.
It's evening rush hour and motorists are eager to get home. But these activists have other ideas. This is what's known as a direct action protest. The goal is to cause as much public disruption as possible and grab media attention along the way. They want to pressure the German government to do more to tackle climate change. This is the 50th time Christian has blockaded streets like this.
So what's the plan here today, Christian?
The most important part is that we get attention to the climate crisis and precise political actions against that.
And do you think these people are getting that message, or I mean, why stop traffic? What's the use of that?
Yes, so most of these cars are unfortunately still powered by fossil fuel, so oil and gas, and distilled into petrol. So we need to stop somewhere and we need to do something about the climate crisis. So it's an obvious choice.
Traffic is backed up all the way down the street going back into the city, and some of these motorists are really quite irate. Now, Christian hopes this kind of action will draw attention to the climate crisis, but I wonder if he's making more enemies than friends.
Was denken Sie an das? scheiße geworden, weil ich muss meine Tochter holen.
Was passiert hier? Was ist das Problem?
Den Kopf kaputt. Die wollen die Welt retten mit was? Mit 5 Leuten. Oder was keine Straße macht.
Also, es gibt keine Krise?
Nee, für mich nicht.
Warum nicht?
Die Welt ist kaputt.
Also,
Die machen mehr Sorgen.
Do you see a lot of growing public apathy for climate action? People switching off from the debate?
Yes, it is difficult to convey the message that this becomes more urgent. We never ever had this idea that we will be popular. The goal was to transport a message about the climate, and if we get hated by the way, then this is fine.
Christian is part of an activist group called Last Generation, which sprung up about 2 years ago and helped pioneer direct action protesting in Germany.
Hallo, mein Name ist Christian Bloy.
Ich bin der Wolfgang.
Hallo, ich bin Mirjam.
Klimakatastrophe, das größte Leid über die Menschen bringt.
Sehr einfach CO2 im nennenswerten Ausmaß einsparen lässt.
Das ist aus meiner Sicht verwerflich und darf so nicht weitergehen. Deswegen setze ich mich bei der Kampagne ein.
Erkläre ich mich bereit, Maßnahmen des zivilen Ungehorsams zu ergreifen und beispielsweise...
Fantastisch.
At first, their protests were light touch. Then they started blocking traffic. To prevent police simply picking them up and moving them, they started gluing their hands to the road. And it proved very effective in grabbing headlines. Their opponents started calling them Klimakleber, climate gluers. Then, things really escalated. This is Christian and his fellow activist Wolfgang, or Volley for short, breaking into an oil pipeline, turning off the flow and chaining themselves to the valve. The group's targets expanded. The goal was twofold: get the public's attention and stoke an overreaction from police and security in the hope it might encourage debate about climate change. Germany has pledged to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 55% of 1990 levels by 2030. But when the war in Ukraine erupted, Germany was thrown into a full-blown energy crisis. The country had to decide between its climate goals and keeping the lights on, opting to bring some of its shuttered lignite coal mines back online. It meant groups like Last Generation had to ramp up their actions. For a while, Last Generation's tactics worked, but now a new hard-line approach from German authorities is threatening to undo all that.
Das ist doch so falsch. Das ist alles schon Teil von Repression. Und das ist Teil von Repression, den ich jetzt so als Smart Repression bezeichnen würde.
Christian and Volley are meeting other Last Generation activists ahead of a protest in Berlin tomorrow. Miriam Herrmann advises on the legal risks Last Generation activists face on the front lines.
Wir haben nicht diesen einen Diktator, der mit seiner Polizei da die Proteste zusammenschlägt, sondern wir haben zum Beispiel Gebührenbescheide aus 16 verschiedenen Bundesländern, die alle einzelne Leute betreffen. Dann macht diese Stadt eine Allgemeinverfügung. Und in Passau kommen noch irgendwie Bescheide für Sondernutzungsverbot und da kriegst du eine Strafe. Und in München, da verbieten sie Volley, Sekundenkleber zu transportieren. Und
in Berlin alone, police have spent more than 400,000 hours working on more than 4,500 incidents registered against climate activists. While in the southern state of Bavaria, activists can be held for up to 30 days in preventative detention, meaning police can take them into custody before they carry out a protest, It's a strategy originally intended to tackle football hooligans. It's part of what Miriam calls smart repression. She's a protest veteran herself. That's her throwing mashed potato, of all things, on a Claude Monet painting.
It's not just a legal crackdown. Dass nämlich die Repression schon anfängt in dem Moment, wo sich PolitikerInnen hinstellen und sagen, diese Klimaterroristen und das sind doch alles Kriminelle, dass da schon die Repression anfängt. Da müssen wir jetzt ganz schnell, ganz hart dagegen und sich dann da, wer war das denn, Dobrindt oder so, hinstellt und sagt, ja, das ist ja hier wie die Taliban.
Extremismus ist. Und wenn das nicht die Vorstufe zu Terror ist, was ist dann die Vorstufe von Terror?
Hartes Durchgreifen ist hier erforderlich, auch bis hin zu Haftstrafen natürlich.
10 Jahre Knast für die Idioten vom BER, das wäre mal eine Ansage. Verantwortlich für alle Schäden.
These politicians are all from the far-right Alternative für Deutschland Party, or AfD. Once dismissed as a fringe movement, but now rapidly gaining support in Germany. It's continually shifted to the right, pushing fierce anti-refugee, anti-immigration and anti-climate rhetoric. More recently, it's sought to capitalise on voter frustrations with the rising cost of living and electricity bills as Germany tries to transition to cleaner energy.
So it seems to me that politicians who are in charge right now, they adopt policy suggestions from the far right, including slower climate protection, and that's quite dangerous.
Last Generation says the AfD is both feeding off public anger at the direct action protests and fueling it.
Jetzt verpiss dich! Wir müssen arbeiten! Geh weg! Hören Sie doch auf!
Diese Quadratik kann nicht zur Seite gehen!
But they don't see us as human anymore, and this is like a really dangerous dynamic that we have there, and that's really what we're up against.
Da war ein Autofahrer, der schaute mich ganz grimmig an, böse, und meinte zu mir, ich wäre ein Klimaterrorist.
Aber trotzdem addiert sich das alles. Ja? Und jedes Mal ist wie diese ganzen kleinen Steinchen, die dir jemand in den Rucksack reinlegt. Ja? Und das spüre ich jetzt nach den 2 Jahren in Deutschland ziemlich massiv.
The AfD is facing allegations its rhetoric is fueling abuse against climate activists. So I want to put this to one of the party's loudest voices against Last Generation.
Hallo, Herr Woldert.
Hallo, herzlich willkommen im Berliner Abgeordnetenhaus. Ich denke, und das ist auch die Meinung meiner Partei, dass unser Anteil, der zum Klimawandel beiträgt, wesentlich geringer ist als das, was uns suggeriert wird. Übrigens, das tut mir auch leid für die Menschen, wenn ich die dann in einem hysterischen Wahn bei TikTok und anderen sozialen Medien weinen und schreien sehe, weil sie sich Sorgen machen, dass morgen die Welt untergeht.
Climate activists that we've spoken to say the AfD is enabling a culture of threats and violence and hatred, capitalizing on emotions about climate change in order to win votes. What's your response to that?
Ich spreche die Dinge an, die auch passieren. Und wenn sich junge Menschen auf der Straße festkleben, wenn sie Flughäfen blockieren, wenn sie in Hochsicherheitsbereiche eindringen, dann kann ich von Terrorismus sprechen. Das sind Straftaten.
There's a difference between civil disobedience, which is what the activists say they're doing, and an act of terrorism. Why call them terrorists?
Es gibt auch im Rahmen des Terrorismus unterschiedliche Eskalationsstufen. Es gibt Terroristen, die einfach nur töten wollen. Und es gibt eine Art von Terrorismus, wenn ich andere Leute terrorisiere.
But do you accept that by using the word terrorist, you're encouraging hatred and potentially attacks against these activists?
Ich verstehe durchaus, dass die Sprache dann vielleicht für den einen oder anderen zu hart klingt. Aber wenn ich Menschen terrorisiere, was bin ich denn dann? Ja, wenn ich Terror ausübe, egal in welcher Art und Weise, dann muss ich es mir auch gefallen lassen, dass ich so benannt werde, wie andere mich sehen. Den Unterbindungsgewahrsam wollte ich auf bis zu 30 Tage ausweiten. Wir brauchen eine Ausweitung der Videoüberwachung im öffentlichen Raum. Ich brauche eine restriktivere Maßnahmenmöglichkeit, eine Ermächtigungsgrundlage im Rahmen der Steuerverhandlung.
The AfD wants to see laws toughened to squash Last Generation for good. But the criminalisation of activists is already well underway in Germany. being pushed by more mainstream conservative parties.
I was at my partner's house. At 7 a.m., the police knocked at the door. The daughter from my partner opened the door. There were at least 10 policemen standing there with masks and uniforms, weapons. The first thing I noticed from the raid was police surrounding my bed, handing over the court order. The court order also said that they are supposed to take cash I had at home, my electronic devices, phone, laptop, but also any indications of I might be a left-wing extremist. I was really nervous of doing something wrong or, but they were the anti-terror group. So that was a direct connection to the previous language from politicians, that we were the terrorists, so the terror police has to come and raid our homes.
The nationwide raids were televised across Germany and saw police seize computers, freeze bank accounts, and shut down Last Generation's website. Investigators were alleging the group had fundraised 1.4 million euros to finance what they called crimes, but what Last Generation says are non-violent direct action protests. It was being alleged that Christian and other activists like Miriam were all part of a criminal organisation.
So whenever there's this accusation that you're a criminal group, they can tap your phone, search your location, raid your home, and so on. So these are all typical measures for mafia, for criminal gangs, and everything that happens underground. These raids, for example, or wiretapping of phones of activists becomes the norm, then, I mean, free speech is in danger, and this is the core of democracy, and I'm quite worried about this.
The raids sparked an outcry outside Germany. The UN Special Rapporteur on Environmental Defenders said they were deeply worried, while the Council of Europe's Commissioner for Human Rights said there's a clear asymmetry between the responses of many state authorities and the standards that safeguard the rights to freedom of peaceful assembly. Last Generation has gathered for their demonstration in downtown Berlin. Police are also here in numbers, expecting direct action tactics like hand gluing. But today, we've been told Last Generation will make a surprise announcement.
Ich weiß nicht, ob ihr es mitbekommen habt, aber wir haben ja am Montag eine neue Strategie verkündet für die letzte Generation, dass wir das Kleben sein lassen werden.
After 2 years, this marks a significant shift for Last Generation. They need more people to join the cause and not fear arrest.
Und davon gibt es viele. Es gibt viele Menschen, die sich anschließen, die mit uns mitlaufen werden, die sich mit uns auf Straßen stellen werden und die sich aber vielleicht nicht angeklebt hätten. Und diese Menschen brauchen wir.
The hope is that by having a less extreme strategy, they avoid the harsh legal repercussions brought against Last Generation's first generation. Miriam is facing up to 5 years in prison if the allegations that Last Generation is a criminal organisation are upheld.
The government reacted with a smart repression kind of approach, and it was just so smartly all put together that it just slowly suffocated us and didn't punch us off the street, you know? It's getting really fucking dangerous for democracy.
Christian is mired in a half a dozen court cases around Germany.
One solution! One solution!
And Volley has almost 90,000 euros in fines hanging over his head.
It's a very slow-moving protest. The idea is basically to try and clog the roads as long as possible and cause maximum civil disobedience and disruption. It was originally just going to be a protest about the climate crisis, but now they're joining forces with a much larger protest against the far right.
There have been calls to ban the AFD since Revelation's senior party figures attended a secretive meeting alongside neo-Nazi influences. The battle over climate change is delving into the political fringes in Germany. But in Australia, there's a movement to bring action very much into the political and social middle.
Start off with, let's just recap on rising tides, 3 demands.
Along the central coast of New South Wales,
Everyone repeat after me. Indoor coal exports from Newcastle.
a newly reformed climate activist group is laying the foundation for a campaign they hope will make them immune from the crackdowns happening globally.
2025 is when we hope we'll have the power and numbers to launch a civil resistance phase. That's what we're aiming for. That's why our goals for 2024 are about building capacity up until that point.
For Rising Tide, their strategy boils down to a simple adage: strength in numbers.
The most effective movements have mass numbers of diverse and everyday citizens. We know, right, that the majority of Australians are really scared about the climate crisis. So if we can include as many people as possible in this movement, I think that's where we're going to find our real power.
The group aims to have 10,000 members before it launches its civil resistance phase, a rolling wave of disruptive acts, including stopping coal trains and blocking coal ships from passing through the port of Newcastle later this year.
So what strategy or approach will you guys use to try and grow your numbers?
Rising Tide's number one principle is that we target the problem and we don't target everyday citizens.
So you don't piss members of the public off?
So yeah, when we're doing disruptive action, we are always trying to target either the fossil fuel companies or the politicians who are enabling this crisis to continue.
A perfect example of this is their blockade of the Newcastle port in 2023, the world's largest coal export port, which saw thousands of ordinary Australians in canoes blocking shipping channels for 30 hours. It was the largest act of civil disobedience in Australian history and led to the arrests of over 100 kayakers, including Alexa's 97-year-old grandfather.
So Alan, at 97, you're the new fresh face of the climate movement in Australia.
Well, it was really nothing naughty. It was just a group of people there quietly on the water. We didn't really disrupt anything.
Were you willing to be arrested at the blockade?
Oh yeah, it didn't matter to me. Yeah. But when you really stop and think of it, what does age matter? It's what the person does. The fact that I'm 97 shouldn't disqualify me from making a statement or taking a stand. You know, the number of floods that you hear these days, I never heard those sort of things in my day.
Alan's arrest helped the Rising Tide protest go viral.
A 97-year-old man is among more than 100 people charged.
The group says it wanted to reach the living rooms of ordinary Australians with an unthreatening message.
I remember at the blockade there was a quote calling us extremists. And the footage that accompanied that quote was some young kids playing in the water with inflatable toys. And I think that real contrast, it really subverts what people expect, and it really makes them think about who is it that is standing up for this. And in our case, It is so many people from all different backgrounds and ages and walks of life.
But family-friendly mass protests aren't what Volley thinks will achieve much-needed results now.
Yeah, so what's the plan today?
Buying supplies.
So he's preparing to take an even more extreme stand on his own.
So you just told me that there's a chance it might not end well.
Yeah.
Volley is planning a life-threatening hunger strike.
How far are you willing to go?
I've done everything I really could, and therefore I'm willing to risk my life in order to make it clear that it's really a matter of life and death right now.
Volley is demanding the German Chancellor issues a statement saying humanity's survival is extremely endangered by climate change, that the CO2 content in Earth's atmosphere is already far too high, and that radical action is needed now.
Hi, das ist Tag 1 meines Hungerstreiks.
Good morning. So, this is my 15th day.
It's my 27th day.
By now, he's lost over 10 kilograms, and fatigue is starting to set in.
It was a shitty day yesterday.
Volley has now been on hunger strike for over 40 days. He's losing weight rapidly, and doctors are checking his vitals.
If this ends badly for you and you lose your life, do you think that would make a difference?
Well, at least people will ask, so why did this guy die? Why did the government let him die? Yeah, he demanded from government that it speaks out the truth.
With increasingly dire warnings about climate change and accusations that governments aren't doing enough, Last Generation say they'll continue fighting, despite being branded as criminals.
Es sind Straftaten wie Nötigung, es ist der gefährliche Eingriff in den Straßenverkehr, gefährliche Eingriffe in den Luftraum. Es hilft nichts, wenn man das dann versucht zu verharmlosen und von harmlosen Kindern Aktivisten spricht.
If now governments keep people from getting active, it's a fucking death sentence for humanity. And we are going to continue, and it is really hard, but we are trying to find strength in each other and build a global community of people rising up, because we simply don't have much time left.